Cool, we're recording.
Nice. All right, who hasn't gone?
Heath, Dekan, Tommy.
Hi, Dekan here from Raid Guild and DAO House, and yeah, we've been following the profile stuff for a while. We use 3box a lot. Yeah, kind of the contextual stuff around a DAO having a profile and maybe how a DAO could manage that profile would be really interesting, and also the stuff that Metagame is doing with their profiles. I'd like to see how that we might be able to integrate something with that.
I'm Tommy. I'm also Raid Guild, which has been talked about a lot, so I'll leave that be. I also work on Clear Fund, and which is like a grant fundraising sort of thing, like CLR, like Gitcoin grants. And we've discussed a lot of using 3box profiles for the project or the grant receiver profiles. So definitely interested in exploring that more.
Heath.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm Fabric. I'm one of the front-end developers of OneHive. Yeah, really excited for the code and see how we can integrate profiles into the Honeypot DAO.
And I think I'm the last one here. I'm Pete, working on Metagame. We're building these general profiles, and it seems that a bunch of other people are also building the profiles, and we're all going to use 3box, so I thought it makes sense to try to get everyone together and see how can we build these profiles to make it so that they work across the different interfaces.
Barada, I think you haven't went.
Yeah, what up? I like DAOs. I really like cross-DAO collaboration, which I think is kind of awesome. Yeah, saw this was happening, so thought I'd drop in and say hi and see what you guys are up to.
Barada's middle name is I Like DAOs, for whoever doesn't know. Barada, I Like DAOs, Barada.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so I think I have a few main things that I sort of want to flesh out here. One of them is this idea of linking identities and linking multiple addresses to a single 3box identity. I think that's one, and just kind of fleshing out how that works exactly in terms of what if multiple addresses have their own 3box, and how do those get merged? And figuring out a way is there an implementation currently where people can actually merge their addresses, or is it sort of on a DApp by DApp basis? And then the other one was, I know we have GitHub and Twitter as the two verified identities you can set up by default in 3box. Wondering if we can extend those and add more stuff to that, and what that looks like, whether it's 3box implementing it, or we just sort of figure out a standardized way to do it. Some things that I would want to add to there are Discord accounts, for example, and what else? Oh yeah, it was discourse accounts, but those are tricky because each discourse forum has its own set of, or it has its own user accounts. So was wondering, maybe since so many projects use discourse, if there's a way to log into discourse with 3box, something like that. And also ENS, wondering if wondering what opportunities there are there to sort of surface that information as a part of your 3box profile, or if it's better just to kind of keep it separate. And yeah, lastly, I just wanted to sort of share what we've been working on in terms of metagame. So I don't know if some of you guys might have seen this, but like this is like just a test page for the API that we're setting up for our profiles, where we're loading like the profile information from 3box, loading like the DAO memberships from the DAO House subgraph, contact information from 3box, XP from SourceCred, and we're kind of surfacing it all under like a single GraphQL API. So we have our representations of players in our own database that we can then join with like 3box information and DAO House memberships and stuff like that. And yeah, like there is sort of that like default set of fields you get in your like 3box profile, like your description, job, location, name. But we were wondering like how we can sort of like extend or expand this list a bit more so that like you know, more dApps can use this information here, because like I know we can sort of manually store additional data in these profiles, but unless we sort of like standardize or come up with like figure out what fields we want to use for this stuff, it's kind of hard. But yeah, that's I guess my list of questions and thoughts.
Cool. So I guess you had like three things there. Like the first thing being like multiple addresses being linked to one profile, and then the second thing was like adding additional like verification services, and the final one was just like having a way to do like more fields for a profile. We could start addressing those things, or like we can talk about those things. But I wonder if it would be more helpful if centered or kind of thinking and work they've been doing on identity index, and kind of like see how that maps to this problem set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I have one question before I jump in. Like, Hamad, what's the timeline? Just so I have some context as to like urgency versus as long as there's a plan.
I think like there's not necessarily like a strict deadline or something that we have to like we need by a certain time. It's more so like because we can get away with like just doing a lot of stuff in our own database, but ideally we'll be able to leverage 3box for as much stuff as possible. For example, I know DAO House right now, the actual like information about the DAO, as in like what's the like image for this DAO, the description, all that sort of stuff, that's just stored in like a database in AWS. And you know, if there's a way that we can not have to store that in a database in AWS, then that would be ideal. But you know, it still works for now. So yeah, I think like it's more so aligning strategies here on how we can start to move stuff into 3box. Also, one more thing I wanted to mention is like the reason we're storing a lot of stuff in our database, and we likely will to store stuff in our database, is the ability to sort of like search and filter like among a lot of these data points. I can't sort of go to 3box and be like, give me all the players that, you know, have this much XP, or, you know, do all this more advanced sort of stuff. So what we'll likely end up doing is syncing data to 3box, and then, you know, also storing it on our side so we can kind of keep them in sync, but get the benefits of having a like searchable database.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, it's good context. There's definitely like a ton I think that we can cover. And I think some of you may be familiar, but yeah, so like we've obviously been working on 3box for the last 2 years, and like a lot of the things you're describing, or some of them at least, would have been hard because, you know, with 3box, it's like there's only really one profile. And how can, you know, you create multiple profiles, or, you know, one for your DAOs or one for other sorts of systems, and how do we basically not store all this data primarily on 3box's infrastructure, which has been a goal for a while. And even doing things like linking multiple accounts and all of that. Like, we basically we've been working on Ceramic, which is obviously like a decentralized network. But on top of Ceramic, we've been working on this standard called IDX. And IDX is more or less just a linked data structure. You kind of think of it like a graph of documents that can provide the right framework for building all the things that you want. And it might be, so for just a helpful visual, I'll pull it up, but I won't really spend any time on it, just so I can like, let me pull it up here. So this is the general idea. So you can imagine that these are just documents stored on a peer-to-peer network, but they have references to each other and links. And so what 3box we basically have today is the DID, which is the 3ID, and it's attached to an Ethereum address on our server, and it's mapped to a single like root index, and that root index is basically where we store all the profile information. And it's just like in the top level. But it creates a lot of rigidity. And so what we have now is with Ceramic, we'll have the ability to do things like, you know, map a DID to its root index, to a profiles index, and then from that profiles index map to n number of profiles. And so like a user could theoretically like have a basic profile that they use for more or less, you know, it's like their standard. And then they might have a profile for DAOs or for whatever thing we might want to call it. So we could actually take a lot of liberty in this conversation, if that's something that you might want, to really like define, like in here, you might have DAO and it links to a Ceramic document that is whatever schema for a profile you want. And everyone can sort of universally reference the same way. And where you're wanting to add new account links, we have basically like a place where it says social accounts, and then it maps to a document which stores these claims or these verifiable credentials issued by a third party saying, yes, this user owns that account, in a standard schema. So we could definitely extend it to Discord or other platforms. There's some amount of, yeah. Yo, hey, Kevin. Cool. And so what we really, the tricky, or at least the like reality of account verifications is, as 3box, you know, we'll still keep running the ones we built. You know, there's a chance we could want to extend those, but theoretically anyone can build a service that just said like checks if a user posted a message containing their DID at this protected location. So like only a place where if you signed in with that account could you post. For example, like on your Twitter feed, right? Like you can't post to your Twitter feed if you're not authenticated. And so there's a lot of ways that we could do that, which I think are probably secondary to some of the core structure that we're talking about. And then you know, and it's basically flexible to whatever we want it to do. And so it's less about, I think, trying to bend 3box to whatever we need, but I think more about just figuring out what we want and understanding how it can plug into the structure, because 3box and profiles are just like one small piece of this. But with this, you can even do things like have a, you know, a follows list or a contacts list, or a collaborators list, or whatever you want in connections. And so you could also have like portable social graphs across DAOs, and things like that. So I don't know if this has made a bunch of sense. Does it? Or do you have any questions?
That's super helpful. Yeah, I guess if anyone else has any questions or anything to add in.
And there's even other things that we can do. So in the collections index, it's basically just like data collections, usually is issued by a provider or an app as a user uses them. So if there's like verifiable claims issuers like Bright ID or any of these other like anti-Sybil type of services, those claims could be stored as a collection. And that way they're also reusable and portable across. So you can add, like, again, it really is just like, what do you need? And then we can really just work to define what those things are. Like, so I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to make a profile, do whatever you want it to do. Like, this group can just make a schema, like a JSON schema, and you can implement it, and just, you know, add it to the profiles index if you want a DAO specific profile, or whatever you want to call it, whatever context you want to give it. And so, yeah, I mean, and as far as the account linking, Joel can speak more to that, but that is going to be like the first things we're actually like working on, I think, next sprint, on Ceramic. So you'll be able to associate like n number of keys from any network to the same identifier. So whatever you want, you know, 50 Ethereum keys if you want, and a couple keys from other blockchains. There's also an interesting, so sort of like, as I just continue on this path and then I'll stop. There's also been talk of creating on Ceramic, documents are, you know, mutable and signed. And we can create a similar type of a structure for a DAO. And we would just need to, in Ceramic, create a new record type called like whether it's a DAO record type or whatever the abstraction of that functionality is. But like, if there's an on-chain vote or something and it gets approved, then it can like execute a signature and append a Ceramic document. Right, Joel? I think you know more about that. But there's definitely the case to be made for that as well. So like user profiles and DAO metadata and stuff can all be sort of managed in the same way.
So quick question about this new like profiles index setup. One thing we were having trouble with is like, there was some parts of the metagame profiles that were updated like asynchronously and not directly by the user. So AKA like their XP scores. So it's not something where we actually have like a signed in authenticated like box that we can actually update, because like we would need the user to like give their signature, sort of be using the DApp while that update is there. And I was wondering like if there's any way in this that a box or like a profile can be updated, or a user can give permission for a profile to be updated by a different entity on its behalf, I guess.
And is sorry, Joel, go ahead.
Cool. I mean, so for the first question, and then I can fill it out if I'm missing something. But for the first question, like what you can do there is like really you have like an identity that's your server, right? So the server is like issue, like basically it's updating the reputation based on something. So what you could do in this structure is basically you have your server create a Ceramic document that's like owned by the server, and then you put like a link to that document in your identity index. And then whenever your kind of backend wants to like make an update to your XP score or whatever, you can do that because it owns that document, and it's not the user that owns the document. So in that sense, you can like have that type of like updating system that's not controlled by the user. The user doesn't need to be authenticated. And then your second question is a little bit more tricky. It's something that we want to do like a little bit more longer term, but that's something called like CCAPs, and it's basically a type of authorization-based capability. So that would look something like I have a DID, and I give a capability to update this specific document to your DID. And then as long as you have that capability object, then you can make updates. And if I see that you do something stupid, then I can revoke that capability. But that's like a little bit more hard to implement, and that's not something that's going to be ready right now. But the first thing with like having a document is owned by your backend, that's entirely doable.
Cool. I guess what's the sort of timeline with this stuff in terms of like maybe not this whole like awesome full setup, but at least something minimally viable that we can start playing with or exploring at least?
So there's if you're looking for something to start playing with, this, I mean, you could have something as early as, I don't know, like a week or so, but it would be on testnet for Ceramic. But basically we have, we're making a library that, you know, an app's front end can just integrate, and would make it really easy to deploy this index structure for a user. So basically like initialize the user's IDX and their DID if they don't have one, and add like a profile. So you can say like create profile, and then you like import a schema that you deploy separately. So you like, you know, use a CLI, create a schema, and then use that in your library, and then it will just like deploy these documents for you. For Ceramic generally, like we're hoping to get to mainnet. We're aiming for like mid Q4. So like a couple months. But there's already people starting to play around with this too. So it's definitely like, yeah, should be possible soon if it's just like you want to test it and make sure everything works.
So like, what exactly does it mean mainnet? Because Ceramic's on IPFS, right? And it's chain agnostic. So what's mainnet?
Yeah, mainnet's more like a namespace or like a subnet, because it's basically there might be some subtle things that, you know, need to change or something. So it's kind of hard to tell people that data is going to be really guaranteed and 100% persistent. But Joel, you have anything more to add?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it. So basically the DevNet that we have right now, there are some planned kind of breaking changes there that we basically want to like have implemented before we launch it. It's like partly for like just efficiency of like syncing a document, and partly for like some features that actually need to change before we actually launch the LiveNet. Otherwise they would like break the network or like break all the existing documents. So the LiveNet is kind of, when we launch that, that's like, okay, when it's launched, then all documents that have been created on the LiveNet will continue to function as they've done like since they're created. So it's more about like the promise to like keep all the documents like or no like breaking changes to like that like invalidates documents.
Okay. So one other thought I have here is that I know a lot of this like profile data or like stuff like the maker badges and whatnot, like a lot of it's based on on-chain data or like subgraphs from Graph Protocol. And Graph Protocol subgraphs are like a place where we can like query and get data from. So is there a way in this system where we can connect like a 3-box or a ceramic document to like data on a subgraph and sort of like specify how to join like some sort of like the 3ID or their Ethereum address associated with it, and then pull data from a subgraph and use that as a source of truth? Like that is kind of what we're doing right now in like our GraphQL setup. And I'm happy to sort of expose the APIs we're building to everyone and use that. But I'm wondering if you guys thought about integrating that more natively as a source of truth. It's kind of like a different setup because it's not really stored on IPFS or anything. But yeah.
Yeah, there is, so we've been having a bunch of meetings with the graph about how they can index data on Ceramic and pull it into a subgraph. And that should entirely be possible. So basically like, you just need to define what you would want from the Ceramic network. Like it's kind of hard to just say, give me all documents from this user, because they'll have a ton of information on their identity that's like in no way really related to the things that this group cares about. But what you would want to do is like each document, they can have tags and they'll have schemas. And so what you could do is like, say I want like the users, this specific profile tag and schema, and you can like configure it that way. So they probably wouldn't be able to just give you all the information for a given DID or Ethereum account to DID, but they'll definitely be able to give you the information you need. You just need to set it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, basically you would define like, okay, so I need this subgraph and this subgraph for identities for this like set of users. So like you could basically tell the graph node to like index, or I want the metagame profile and the regular basic profile, and then the linked accounts. And then you would have those GraphQL nodes like index those kind of subgraphs of that identity. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in terms of like linking accounts, how do you actually define ownership of a 3ID? Like, let's say, like for metagame, we wanted to set up something with Magic Link so that people can just like log in with their email account and use that for their like profile in case they don't have an existing 3-box. But also if they do have an existing 3-box, be able to just like, if they have it on their MetaMask or whatever else, be able to like join their Magic Link account with their 3-box account. So like, what does that actually look like in terms of is it that if 2 accounts are linked, that if they sign anything with like either account, that they can update their 3-box and it's sort of portable between them? Or is a linked identity just sort of a way to like, say, hey, this address belongs to the same person, but it doesn't actually have ownership of that 3ID? And if the latter, like how can the ownership of 3IDs be like transferred?
Yeah. So I'm pulling this back up because it's a helpful talking point. So the answer is it could be either. We sort of separate the concerns of like adding an account as an authentication mechanism to a 3ID. So like being able to own or control a 3ID from an account. And what that means is every document that 3ID owns is, you know, basically like you authenticate a 3ID with a blockchain account, and then that 3ID is actually the thing that's signing messages within the system. So you can add a key as an authentication method, and then you can choose to publicly link it if you want. And so they're kind of separate things. And there's a lot of work. Just because you add an account as an authentication method doesn't mean that it's publicly disclosed. We do like some obfuscation and encryption, so there, like you can't look at a DID and be like, oh, all these keys are its owners. But you can make those public. And that's the difference in a keychain. So a keychain is like a set of keys that can control your DID. And then accounts index is just like a set of accounts that you've publicly linked. So it could be either one, whichever one you need.
Okay. So like in the context of a DAO, like let's say a DAO has a profile and we want to sort of give the ability for the DAO members to keep that profile up to date, or, you know, change the DAO's like image or description or whatever. There's a few ways I can see this working. One is that like the DAO members themselves would actually have permission to do so, but that might be tricky since like you need to probably do a DAO vote to actually like approve that change or something. The other option I was thinking of is like using stuff like Moloch Minion or Argon Agent, if you guys are familiar, to sort of act as like the account or the owner of that 3ID and control it that way. And then I guess, yeah, this is more of a question for Dekan. Like, I know Minion can like create transactions and people can vote on that, but what about like doing signatures? Because updating a 3-box profile isn't really like a transaction as far as I'm aware. It's just, you know, you sign something. So how would that work with Minion?
So it would be like, so just to be, I have a question first before I can answer, but Minion can do like arbitrary Ethereum transactions. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. And the same thing with the Argon agent, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you would do is basically, or the thing we want to support inside of this IDX system and library that we're building is you basically would have, you would just like make an update to the profile, and that's just like stored plainly in IPFS without any signature. And then someone that wants that to be solid, like finalized, they submit that as like an on-chain proposal. And once that on-chain proposal passes, then that becomes part of like the document chain of that DAO's profile document, which means that you don't really need a signature to like authenticate to get access to like some private key material in the case of a DAO, because you would just like have someone make an update to kind of, let's say, the profile, and then you just like anchor that update on chain. So you don't need kind of that secret key in that sense. But that also means that the DAO can't like own private encrypted data. But I think that's fine for most of these early use cases. Does that make sense?
So it would, to actually anchor that data or to like add that updated document to the chain, it's an actual transaction, not just a signature. Like, you know, because if I go update my 3-box profile right now, it just asks for a signature. But in Ceramic, it's an actual transaction, or do you have the option to use a transaction if you want?
Yeah, you have the option to use a transaction. So like right now in Ceramic, like you just use the same system as 3-box, where you just like have like a signature, and then that signature is used to derive some keys, and those keys are used to sign every update to a document. But if in a DAO, you probably want to do like a vote to like change profile or some like settings or like some services that the DAO utilizes. So in that case, you want to have like this on-chain vote, and then you can use like make the update of that document as like an on-chain component. We haven't built out that kind of record type yet, but that's possible to do.
Would that work on Ethereum mainnet and something like XDAI as well?
Yeah, I think that should definitely work on both of those. Because like Ceramic is really kind of blockchain. The XDAI DAO documents would be like updated and anchored on XDAI, and Ethereum mainnet on Ethereum mainnet. And if you use like another blockchain, then yeah, you would like make the proposals there. So that should be totally possible.
So I have a question. Is there how does the Aragon agent and the Moloch minion, how do they get executed? Like what triggers the signature?
I think it's so with minion, I think you basically like paste in like the transaction data, and then it goes up to a DAO vote, and if the vote passes, then the minion will execute that transaction.
Yeah, just anyone can execute it if it passes.
Yeah, there's no signature.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, because I'm wondering, like, you know, it would be cool if they could like do a vote and then just, you know, create a Ceramic update and not need to do like an Ethereum transaction. Because you have the key, right? You have a key that can sign.
Contracts don't have private keys, which is the challenge. So with agent, we have this like delegated signer functionality for when you like need to have a signature on behalf of the contract, but there isn't really a standard for that. And then you'd also have to have like you'd be in a very similar model where it would be sort of equivalent to the DAO just managing a keychain, it sounds like, for the Ceramic profile, because you'd have individual members that would be capable of like kind of signing on behalf of the DAO or the agent or the minion.
Mm-hmm. The thing that's kind of nice with Ceramic though is that in theory, I don't know if this is like the most efficient or the easiest way to implement this, but in theory, like you could update a Ceramic document by creating a proposal, and the proposal is used the IPFS hash of the update, and if that proposal passes, then that's like the valid state of the document. So you don't actually need to like do and execute something on chain or like execute anything other than like the proposal passed. So in theory, that's like the minimal interaction, the most minimal interaction that would be needed. But maybe it would be easier to have like an other kind of external contract that kind of executes the transaction, because then that would be like the same kind of interface for all different DAOs, basically.
So I guess the answer is it's possible. It just depends on how we want to design it. Like there's ways you can do it without transactions. There's other ways you can do it with transactions and follow the normal workflow. But yeah, DAOs, like with Ceramic or with these agents and minions, it can definitely work.
Cool. Yeah, I think that would be a valuable thing to flesh out. I know with agents specifically, like they have like Frame where like you can just log in with, like you can basically use MetaMask on behalf of the agent. So it might be a bit more straightforward there. Dekan, is there any plans to like set up something like that for Minion, where like for example, if I wanted to like use Minion on like OpenSea, be able to just like use my MetaMask to sort of like act on behalf of Minion?
Philosophical question.
No, I that would be cool. I mean, right now you can just import an ABI of whatever it is, and then we've like started doing more like dedicated UIs that incorporate the minion. So if it was an NFT contract, you know, then it would be something that's more specific to those kind of functions.
Yeah. Yeah, this.
But yeah, that is one way actually I've told people to do it, is just, you know, go to the data tab on MetaMask and copy that over and then put it in and reject the transaction or whatever. It would be cool to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it could probably even be like a Chrome extension you can make for Minion to do that. Okay. So I guess like we can circle a bit more on like what we want these profiles to look like and sort of like additional data types. So one thing I know that Raid Guild and Metagame is both trying to do is like have like this idea of like skills or like character classes, you know, so like whether you're like a front end dev, a back end dev, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, like we do have between Raid Guild and Metagame, there is sort of like a similar meme of like, you know, using stuff like warrior and paladin and all this sort of stuff. And then, you know, just having the general idea of like a list of skills. And, you know, with that, it's a bit tricky because we want it to be somewhat standardized, like whether it's like, you know, we let anyone specify any like text field as like a skill. So if someone writes like JavaScript lowercase versus JavaScript uppercase, it should kind of be considered the same skill. That's like, so skills is one thing that we can sort of, I think, fairly easily come together on in terms of adding them to a 3-box profile and then using that as like a source of truth. What other things is there, I guess, from anyone else, like from One Hive or Raid Guild or anything? Like, what other things do you want on our profiles, in your profiles, that might not be there already?
Oh, I have a rough metadata template over here, which has all the stuff. I could just share it real quick, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Let's just checking it out for this and then taking notes. Yeah, so all this stuff. So we got classes here. For us in the guilds, like, you know, yeah, different contexts. I think there are like global, there are top level metagame, I think, things that could be shared. Like, yeah, like languages could be one that's like more global and standardized. And then within each community, they're going to have their own context. So like within the guild, these are the things that are important to us. And some of these things are shared with metagame itself. But like a P token would be a cool one to have, you know, like, but it's really just like a set of data. Some of these are arrays, like context, classes, what raids have you participated in. Some of these like vote power and loot power, your stake, all those can be pulled from the DAO subgraph, but then put into the profile. Availability, I think you guys have that also at the metagame level. So that one's kind of weird. I don't know, like if you want to have, I feel like maybe that's best at the metagame level, at the top level, but you know, then you have like, while you're operating within your community, I think in the guild, we need to have like the specific, how much are you available for the guild, you know, for example. So maybe that does fit into the inside community context, which could follow a similar path to this, to the ceramic profile links. I feel like, you know, this is your Raid Guild profile, this is your metagame profile or whatever. Time created, badges. You know, ENS, yeah. Oh, badges is interesting. Yeah, totally. So that's like kind of like, for us, it would be like NFT achievements, right? Like these are things that the DAO has voted to distribute to a guilder for completing a raid successfully or something. So those are like achievements within the community itself. So that's another one that's like pushed up from lower communities, I think, to the upper metagame level. But yeah, that's really it. And then a little bit on the, like on the Raid Guild profile itself, which I think could be pretty simple, just like contract address, subgraph, URL, avatar, some link to more info, ENS, string if you have it, you know, those types of things, just basic stuff to go and grab these profiles. Probably need a link to this IPFS, I guess, maybe, or something.
Yeah, like I think like you know, like for metagame, it's been like a goal of mine as much as possible to like sort of pull the state from its like original source of truth than to like, you know, actually try to store anything on our side. So things like, for example, like their loot power and guild bank value, I feel like that should be pulled like straight from like the DAO house subgraphs. Because like if as soon as you start to store this in the profiles, then you get into the issue of like that state being out of sync with like if it's stored in two places. But yeah, like in terms of like the availability and personal tokens, the way I saw it is like it's basically like availability to sort of like collaborate on stuff with people in general, or like availability to work on stuff in exchange for your personal token. And yeah, I think like, you know, within Raid Guild itself, it can be like I feel like as Raid Guild expands as well, it'll start to become a bit less like, you know, this is like the thing I'll do, or like this is like the time I have for Raid Guild. It'll be more so be like, this is the time I have in general, and then I'm gonna go on a raid with like some of this time, I guess. And yeah, like in terms of there is that like specific or like community specific data that is for a profile as well. Like for metagame, we have like XP and your like rank. For Raid Guild, that might be you know, your character classes, which we could share, but yeah. And that, I think like it can be stored in like a box, I guess. Like I know 3box has this idea of like a space. I don't know if it's a space or a box. I think it's a space. That's what you guys call it.
Space, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, pulling some of this data from the source of truth, like contacts. Is that what you're kind of talking about? Like, don't put this data in here specifically because you can pull it from the top level profile.
So yeah, I think contacts is one thing that doesn't exist anywhere yet. Like as in, like, I think like, you know, like status, they might have like this concept of contacts within their app, a few other things, but I know you guys showed off in Identity Index this idea of like having a list of contacts. So like, what's the state on that? Because, you know, in metagame, we wanted this idea of like, you know, you can like add someone as a friend or whatever when you visit their profile. So yeah, what does that look like right now?
Yeah, so I completely agree, like trying to rely on the existing sources of truth for things. Like there were a couple things on that list, like NFT achievements being one. Like it gets tricky if we like store references to those in 3box and you rely on 3box because a user can transfer that badge, or a user can not pay to have their ENS name renewed or something, and then they transfer it. It's actually owned by someone else. So I would say that can be handled, like Hamad was saying, in the like subgraph level. Like you could just create whatever index of related information sources you need. But for most of that stuff, 3box can, or the IDX on Ceramic can provide the source of truth for other things. Like it sounds like there's a high level, like whether it's metagame or DAO profile, and then you have other specific profiles for specific implementations where things might differ. In game, like game or DApp specific type of stuff. And contacts is equally flexible. So you could have like, you know, your global contacts list or followers list, people you follow or your contacts, and then you could have app specific implementations of those. And in some ways it'd be like a circular, like a double mapping, because those contacts could live within a collection. So like each app kind of has their own collection, and so you could store mappings to them through the collections index, and then you can create another map to it in the connections index, so like the contacts index, because in some ways it's like you might want to get to that information by looking up contacts lists and then finding it, or you might want to go to that app's information and then get it. Like if you're that app, for example. So like, it's really like, it's not a rigid, like it can only live in one place type of a structure. Like you can actually just create mappings to whatever indexes you need for data that lives at the edges of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can, like, these are all, I think like the lift here will be just defining the schemas that we want. Like if we want a global contacts list, we can make that schema. If we want like app specific ones, we could do that. Or context specific contacts lists. Like you're my contacts within the DAO universe, but not like globally.
I guess just as a clarification too, contacts in this would just be like ways to contact me, basically. So not like these are people I know, but like these are ways that you can contact me, basically.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Yeah.
so they would be attached to the actual person's profile.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I was thinking of like friends list.
Yeah, me too.
That's cool though. Yeah.
So yeah, we can do the friends list type of stuff, the social graph. You can also do like contact information. Feels like we can figure out where to put it in the index. Because in some ways it's, yeah.
Is there like any sort of like example like implementation of this stuff on Ceramic on testnet, like this idea of like connections or like links, and because like I think whatever you guys put out is like what everyone's gonna like huddle around. Like if you look at 3box profiles, right, when you go to like edit your profile in 3box, the fields that are there, that's what everyone uses because that's just what's there. So I think like a lot of it will be like defined by what you guys put out there in terms of like your like recommended implementation of these sort of things. So yeah, I was just wondering, like, is there plans for building something like that on Ceramic, like a reference setup for some of these like common use cases?
Yeah, so we will. Ceramic's like a little different than 3box, just in the sense that like this index provides. Sorry, a fire truck's gonna go by. But hang on one sec. Yeah, just that the index provides a lot more flexibility than 3box ever could. So because like the 3box profile, there was only like one, whatever we put in the app became the like accepted standard. Like with the index, it's like, an app can just like query for the like list profiles, and then you'll get back like a list of all the different things that are the mappings in that profiles index. And that means that it's not explicitly tied to any one implementation. So like we have a basic profile, for example, which I can pull up, but it's not going to contain all of the things that you would want, because it's not really, it's meant to be like, we don't want to bloat it, and it's just meant to be like lightweight with, like you can imagine what a basic profile is, but here, I'll pull it up. And then where I really think the work that can be done is like, this group just defining like, what is the schema that we want to share for a profile? And then where does each implementation deviate and need additional fields? And then we can just create those as documents. But here is, for an example, a basic profile, and I'll share a link to this.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so the basic profile is basically pointed to by something that's called a profile index. And the profile index contains like basically like a map or a list of like different profiles basically, and in there you can kind of claim like a name for a profile and then like specify a schema. So this is like, we've claimed the basic profile for this like basic schema, and then you could claim like what is it called, my meta for the metagame profile and then input the things. Or we as a group come up with like a common like D profile and put the fields that we want to collaborate on in that and create like a common schema for that. But the idea is that this profile index of like different types of profiles will be like a way to like collaborate even if you're not like agreeing on like which fields that are needed.
Yeah, and the you could do so this is the basic profile. Like there's really nothing, I don't think, controversial, not anything controversial in here. But yeah, what you guys also discussed too is about like settings, so like appearance or language or various like settings. And in IDX, we don't have it in the graphic, but there is a settings index. So it can map to like an internationalization settings document, and it could map to like an appearance settings document for things like dark mode or whatever. And it can map to even like an accessibility settings document like text size and stuff. So like common user locales and other settings that you might need, which to us is a bit separate than profiles, because profiles are more just like contextual personas, and settings are more like, this is, you know, how I want my app to sort of behave for me. So it's like the profiles, the notion of like a profile is more like a logical notion than it is technically the same one, because you can like pull all this stuff together from IDX and get whatever you need.
Yeah. So like this is like sort of like the schema you guys defined for your basic profile. Is there like an example implementation of a DApp or something using this? Or like are these profiles actually live on the testnet? Like, can I query for any of this data?
No, not yet.
Does it make sense to implement with 3box as it is now and then migrate to this? Like the basic profile looks very similar in terms of like the data structure to the 3box like standard profiles.
Yeah, the basic profile structure will be, and we're going to migrate all 3box accounts and 3IDs to Ceramic. Joel, I'll let you answer that question about appropriateness and what will change. But it sounds like the basic profile isn't what you guys are after, based on my understanding, is it's like more a custom profile with some custom fields? Or do you imagine that your metagame profile or your D profile just extends the basic profile with additional fields? Like,
yeah, I think like we would want to extend the basic profile, because like whatever the basic profile is, that's what like most people are probably going to have. You know, like, because right now with 3box, like if we use the fields that are in the 3box profile right now, we have a pretty high hit rate in terms of like, if someone logs in with their ETH address, that we'll be able to actually, you know, see what that data is. So I think that's why it's important to sort of, you know, have it like well defined, or have it defined by you guys, because whatever you define, that's what everyone's going to sort of use more globally. And the more people that use that set of fields, the better it is, and the more like, you know, interoperable these profiles will be. Because if like everyone, you know, if, you know, maybe us in this call, you know, Raid Guild, One Hive, all of us, we can like figure out what profile thing we want, but some other community and some other silo might not be doing that and might be doing something else. And then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we sort of lose that benefit of having a global universal thing. So yeah, I do think it would be like, it would be good for you guys to sort of like lead that discussion, I guess, or lead that definition. Because yeah, basically whatever you guys do is everyone's going to sort of follow your lead.
Well, I'm wondering if it makes sense. So it seems pretty cool, like that basic profile is just a CIP. So would it make sense to structure our own schema, like a Moloch DAO profile, and submit that as a CIP to like have that as a standard?
Yep, that would be awesome, and probably the recommended route. It's like any schema that we come up with, we should probably make a CIP for it and see if it can be generalized. You know, rather than, if possible, like rather than just a Moloch schema, if there's like, what is the more general way of reflecting that, and if we can get alignment on it, then it means that more people will use it, and that's sort of the whole point of the CIP process.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, about the badges. So I know like a lot of people have been talking about this stuff, and like, you know, it's mostly sort of been around this idea of NFT badges, which like comes with its own like set of issues in terms of like, you know, no one wants to pay gas fees to mint these NFTs. You know, sometimes a lot of these like badges or certificates, we don't want it to be transferable. Like if this badge was like an award for something you did, then you shouldn't be able to like sell that award to someone else. And, you know, I think Ceramic does like fit into this in terms of if you can figure out a schema for whatever these badges or certificates are, they can just exist as documents and not actually have to be NFTs. And I think for something like that, we can't really do anything there in terms of 3box right now. We'd have to sort of wait for Ceramic to be ready to implement this idea of like badges or certificates. But yeah, I do feel like that is the right setup to have for these things. Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to say in regards to that from Gitcoin and the sort of badges and achievements you guys have.
Ours are ERC 721s, so I don't know. That's how they're built now. Whether or not that is what they are in the future, I don't know. But that's where we're at right now.
How has it been with the recent gas prices? Like, do people actually still use them, or how are they minted in the first place? So people mint their own.
You hear
badges?
my deep sigh. So what we did was right now we're just letting people claim their NFTs, and if they pay for the gas price, we'll issue. So there's two things, like peer-to-peer. People are still buying them, like 5 of them per day, and like sending them to each other. Like, great job on this project. You're a JavaScript ninja. But like for the airdrops that we do, which typically get like 100 to 150, we were just paying the gas back when it was like 1 or 2 gwei. And we were like, once the gas prices increases, we were spending like 2 ETH per day on them. And so now we just like, if when the airdrops, we will, we'll let you claim them and put them on your Gitcoin profile, but we won't sync it to chain until ETH comes down again. And so basically we've got like probably 5,000 to 10,000 NFTs that we haven't issued on chain yet because of that. So I don't know. I'm kind of kicking the can is the honest answer on the NFT things. But like, if we could move it into like a DID or like a meta transaction, I think that would be probably the more scalable, or like a layer 2, then that would be the more scalable way to go.
Yeah, layer 2 might be there, and then they can just like settle later if they want to actually like take the NFT and sell it or something.
Yeah, the other thing to note here is that like we launched Kudos as a way of like, we want it to be like a digital Hallmark card. Like $4 when you buy, like when you spend $4 on like a Hallmark card to like show your wife or your mom that you care about Mother's Day, or like you care about them, then it's almost like the digital equivalent is buying like a $4 NFT and sending it to them. But like what it turned out to be is like, they kind of just turned out to like, for 80% of the time, just to be like collectibles. They're like stickers almost, is like how they ended up being using. So like in the context of reputation, I kind of think that like we might have blurred the line between collectibles and like reputational tokens in a way that might not be super useful to the Ceramic and the 3box stuff.
Yeah. I know Austin Griffith has been working on basically like NFTs on XDAI, where you can sort of, you know, create NFTs and play around with them and send them back and forth. And then you can then like pay to sort of move the NFTs onto mainnet once you think that they're valuable enough to have on mainnet. And yeah, I guess this comes back to like this whole layer 2 discussion. I know you guys mentioned that, there's like Ceramic will work on all chains, but if I have a profile on mainnet and then I log into a dApp on XDAI, will I be able to like use that same profile, or are there sort of two separate instances that have to keep updated separately?
So the profile is like all of the data of the profile lives off chain, right? So the only thing that's on chain is like the anchors that kind of verify the sequence of updates for the profile. And that basically means that, yeah, you can like use the same profile because it's just like you can authenticate, you can basically link your XDAI address to that profile, but it's just like where the profile data is validated against. But you don't need to do that. That's only like for validating the data, and you don't actually use the data itself of the profile on chain. That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Basically, like whatever context your app is in can be separate from whatever context your data is anchored in.
Cool. Kevin, I guess a question for you. For Gitcoin profiles, what like, are you guys using 3box or anything like that for your stuff? And like, if not, the stuff on your profiles, like I know, you have like a list of like skills, like, I know TypeScript and Java or whatever. Is that just like stored in your guys' database? Is there an API to access that information? And would you guys possibly be interested in sort of aligning on pulling that data from like 3box, or because we want to have a lot of similar things in terms of like a list of skills, a list of maybe contact information and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. My view is that Gitcoin is a bridge to Web3. We made a lot of trade-offs that make us feel like a Web2 app, which is good because we don't have to rely on IPFS or any of this novel technology for like the basic functionality, but it's also bad because it makes us a centralized intermediary. But we're committed to being a benevolent centralized intermediary. So basically the TLDR is that we already have I'm not sure if it actually still works, but we have a 3box sync that like people can do with their profiles. And I don't know how many people are using that, or how often they're syncing their profiles, but we're committed to building a bridge so that we can take whatever data we've populated and push it into the 3box ecosystem. So that already exists, committed to maintaining it, updating it, and like I think during the next Gitcoin grants round, actually making that part of the happy path, it would be an interesting marketing event, because these profile systems are chicken and egg, right? So you gotta put the data into them so that they're useful, which creates that network effect of more people using them. And I think that we can serve in like accelerating that cycle because Gitcoin grants actually has usage. So yeah, I guess TLDR already sort of done some of that stuff, but happy to keep supporting and running marketing events around it.
Cool. Yeah, Kevin, we should sync on how to actually do that. There's probably a somewhat slightly better way than we've done before. And just figuring out exactly what we would need.
Yeah, is the current information accessible via API in any form, even if it's not available in 3box right now? Things like your resume or job status and your list of skills or whatever.
It is. We're not very good about documenting our APIs, but yeah, it is. Maybe I can write up a quick markdown doc that sort of explains how to get access to it.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Just so everyone is aware, we're kind of 20 minutes over the scheduled time. I'm totally fine with it. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually also have to drop, but yeah, invite me to the next one. Looking forward to collaborating.
Sweet. Yeah,
cool.
I think good overall. Got a good bit of context, and yeah, I think we sort of continue on the path forward, and align on some of these like common things that we all want, starting off with 3-box, because it feels like that's what's more actionable right now, and then see when we can start playing with Ceramic to get some more advanced stuff like connections and multiple profiles and whatnot.
Yep. And if the first course of action is just to use 3-box, then I would say, yeah, just figure out, I guess, the collective fields that everyone needs, and you can just start storing stuff in there now. And as long as everyone in the group knows what those fields are, then they can be reusable, at least within like this context. And then when they are migrated to Ceramic, those schemas are more publicly available as CIPs and stuff, and then they can be more globally used. But I guess the first course of action would just be on 3-box, getting this group to like figure out what they need, and then sharing those schemas between us.
Sweet.
Yeah, which I've done a little bit more work here on that during this call. So yeah, we can just refine these schemas. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. When does it make sense to have a follow-up at some time?
Probably.
Yeah, I think like once we have like the first version of our profiles up, same with you, Raid Guild people, which is also me, but yeah. Then yeah, we can sort of sync on that, and then yeah, maybe like once there's something more like actionable on the Ceramic side, it might make sense to sync, because it feels like a lot of the conversations around like, you know, Ceramic is the answer to all this stuff, but you can't use it yet per se. So yeah.
Well, so in like a couple weeks, we're gonna have a library that you can start playing around with it. So is that useful to you, or what do you?
Yeah, I think like once that's ready and we can play with it, we can sort of schedule another call to see where things are at and coordinate more. But yeah, in the meantime, we can sort of just like coordinate async on whatever.
I'd love to jam on the achievements documents or whatever, because it seems to fit outside of the standard profile that you guys are working on at Metagame and Raid Guild side, but does seem to be fairly universal. So maybe I can gather another call and we can talk about a potential CIP around achievements, badges.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
So maybe try to aim for like in 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
I think, yeah.
Sounds good. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.